Hey, what's going on, guys? Realm Gaming here. Before we get started, I just wanted to mention some of my socials in the description of the video. If you want to support the channel, please check those out. If you want to support the channel in other ways, please consider just dropping a like or a nice comment somewhere on the video. It really helps the algorithm push our content out there to a broader audience. With that being said, hope you guys enjoy the episode. Hey, what's going on, guys? Realm Gaming here, back into the video. Today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at the Discipline Priest in Season 1 of War Within for Mythic Plus specifically. So this guide will not cover anything with PvP or raiding. However, you can take some of the things that you learned from this video and it will probably transfer over to some of those different types of gameplay. With that being said, let's go ahead and dive in, and we are going to first take a look at hero talents. So for hero talents, we actually have two different trees. I think that both are viable. Most people, though, are picking Voidweaver in higher keys, and the reason for this is because Voidweaver does have more burst healing than something like Oracle. So I think Voidweaver is probably the better spec if you play it correctly, and if you can properly predict the incoming damage. Then Oracle is probably going to be a little bit better for sustained healing, where you need a lot of healing over a prolonged period of time, because Oracle does have more uptime on your atonement. So in the Oracle build specifically, we have things like Waste No Time, we have things like Fate Bender, and then we also have things like Bright Pupil that are really going to help that uptime on your atonement. So since we have two trees to talk about, I'm really just going to kind of talk about like the general play style of each, and then some of the main nodes on each tree. So let's go ahead and start with the Voidweaver tree, since most people are going to be running Voidweaver. So the way Voidweaver works is you throw out these entropic rifts, and these rifts are actually summoned through your Mind Blast. So from a visual standpoint, the way this looks is, if you're familiar with like Frozen Orb from a Frost Mage, it's pretty much the same thing. It's like a shadow sort of black hole looking thing that goes out, does a bunch of pulsing AoE damage. At the bottom here, we have Collapsing Void. So our penance, each time it damages or it heals, will increase the size of Entropic Rift, and it's sort of like a stacking effect. And then at the end of that rift, it can collapse on itself and it will burst out a whole bunch of damage based on how big you're able to get that rift. Now, while that rift is active, our smite is actually upgraded to something called Void Blast here, and this will replace your smite. And this actually does more damage than our smite, and then we also get increased healing through something called Void Infusion down here. So atonement healing with Void Blast is 100% more effective. So really the idea here is to kind of pair your Mind Blast, or kind of think up your Mind Blast around your atonement healing. So whenever you send a rift out, this is typically going to be a good time to use your Powered Radiance to get atonement out, and you just get a ton of passive big burst healing that we're seeing from Voidweaver. Then one more talent I'm going to talk about here is Void Wraith. So whenever we summon our Mindbender, it is now replaced with Void Wraith. It's like a different spell. It's a different icon. You can see it on my bars down here. So this is going to be like a beefed up version of our Mindbender. So summon a Void Wraith for 15 seconds. That casts a Void Flay from afar. Void Flay deals bonus damage to high health enemies up to a maximum of 50% if they are full health. So this is going to really help you on pull when those mobs are very healthy. Typically, that's the most dangerous part of a Mythic Plus pull, is right off the bat, right when your tank goes in for the first time. So Void Wraith will really help us offset some of that big damage. So that's the Voidweaver tree. Let's go into the Oracle tree just really quick. Take a look at it. So the Oracle tree is going to focus a little bit more on atonement uptime. So you don't really have to play around atonement windows quite as much. I think that this is it does have less throughput, that's for sure. But I do think it's probably easier to play for most people, because you're not having to predict any sort of damage. You have to predict your atonement windows. So that could be a hot take. A lot of people may not agree with what I just said there, but that's just my personal opinion. Oracle is what I'm going to be running at the start of the season. And then as we get into higher and higher healing requirements, where that burst healing is really needed, then I'm going to probably try to focus a little bit more on Voidweaver. I personally just hate the mental overload of having to predict damage and not being able to freely use my Powered Radiance. Okay, enough ranting on that. Let's kind of dive a little bit into the Oracle tree. So you have these three charges here. If you see my Holy Priest guide, these work the exact same way. So you get Premonition of Insight, Piety, and Solace here. But it'll work a little bit differently for Discipline Priest. So with your Insight, you're going to be using your 3 charges on your Power Word Radiance so that you can get more CDR on Power Word Radiance, which basically means more uptime on Atonement. So when I was testing this in beta, I was actually able to keep my Atonement up for 3 minutes straight, not casting anything else but just my Power Word Radiance, and I was able to keep it up for 3 minutes straight. Eventually, I got to like a weird spot where I wasn't able to cast Power Word Radiance again, and the cooldown did eventually catch up with me. But for the most part, in a Mythic Plus setting, you're going to be able to have Atonement up 100% of the time. Now, we do have a couple other things that add to this, and then I'll get into Piety and Solace. But really quick, we have Waste No Time. So this is going to basically make our Power Word Radiance instant cast and cost 15% less mana. So we no longer have a cast time of Power Word Radiance, so that's super nice. And then we also have Fate Bender, so increases the effects of Premonition by 40%, which means we're going to be getting more CDR through Insight, which means more Power Word Radiance, which means more Atonement. Then we also, in the top center, have Preemptive Care, so increases the duration of Atonement by 3 seconds, and the duration of Renew by 3 seconds, so again, more Atonement. Then we also, on our tree, have Bright Pupil, so reduces the cooldown of Power Word Radiance by 3 seconds. So again, that just means more Atonement. So you kind of see all the correlation and synergy between Insight, Power Word Radiance, and Atonement. It's just kind of all throughout the tree. Now, we also have Premonition Piety, so increases your healing done by 20%, causes 98% of overhealing on players to be redistributed to nearby allies. So what this means, the overhealing portion of this means that we can spam heal ourselves, and all of that overhealing is then radiated out onto our allies. Now, the way you play this on Holy is you basically put Guardian Spirit on yourself, and you just kind of spam heal yourself, and all that healing's radiated out between everybody. But on Disc Priest, I wouldn't recommend to do that. You really don't have a ton of strong single target heals. You don't have strong single target healing cooldowns to really get full advantage of this. So really, I just kind of consider this charge just almost like as a stat stick for Disc Priest. So I just like to think of it as you press it, you do more healing. At the bottom, we have Premonition of Solace. Is just a big shield that goes out. You can put this on the tank. You can also put this on a party member who is near death, and it's a very big chunky shield. Then at the bottom here, we have Clairvoyance, and Clairvoyance is going to be all 3 of the other charges combined into one. So when Clairvoyance comes up, you're going to be able to activate Insight, Piety, and Solace all at once into one big charge. So yeah, that's going to be sort of the general gameplay between Oracle versus Voidweaver. So you can kind of make that decision for yourself on which one you want to play. Okay, now let's go ahead and talk a little bit about stat priority. So your main stat priority is always going to be item level over anything. Intellect is our main stat, and just raw intellect is going to be more important than just about any sort of secondary stat that you can get. Now, if you do get 2 pieces that are the same item level, then that's kind of when we can go into secondary stats here. So your main secondary stat is going to be haste. So the reason that we focus on haste is because we want to get as much CDR on our Mindbender as we possibly can. So do have a talent here called Void Summoner. So your Smite, Mind Blast, and Penance Cast reduce the cooldown of Mindbender by 2 seconds. So we're going to be casting spells as often as we can to get as much uptime on Mindbender as we possibly can. The next stat that we're going to focus on is Versatility. And Versatility is very strong to keep yourself alive in high Mythic Plus dungeons. So as you do kind of creep into those higher Mythic Plus dungeons, it will be more and more difficult to survive some of those burst scenarios. That is the main thing that kills people in high Mythic Plus dungeon, is just dying to burst damage that is nearly unhealable. And since Versatility is a percentage, so decreases damage taken by 4%, you kind of see on my screen here, that will actually get stronger and stronger the higher that you push into keys, since that's a percentage value. Then up next, we're going to be focusing on Critical Strike, and then finally Mastery. So your healing and absorption is increased by 70% on targets with Atonement. And I've actually heard in some of my videos that priests who are running the Oracle Hero tree are stacking a bunch of Mastery. And I've heard a lot of people are having good results with that. So that might be something that you can test out yourself. Now let's just kind of talk about the general playstyle of Disc Priest. And the playstyle is very similar between both Oracle and Voidweaver. There is a ton of overlap between the two. So both trees are going to be focusing on your Shadow Covenant. So casting Mindbender enters you into a shadowy pack, transform your Halo, Divine Star, Penance into shadow spells, and increasing the damage and healing from your shadow spells by 20% while active. So this is activated through our pet, and our pet is Mindbender down here. And This is on a 1 minute cooldown, and this will also regenerate mana between each attack. So this is where a lot of the burst healing comes from Disc Priest, is through this pet. And we want to get as much uptime on this pet as we possibly can. And the way that you get more uptime on it is through a spell here called Void Summoner. So your Smite, Mind Blast, and Penance reduce the cooldown of Mindbender by 2 seconds. So the typical gameplay loop is we're throwing out our pet, and then we're doing our general damage rotation to get more CDR on our pet so that we can send it out again. So your Mindbender is something that should always be down. You should never be holding it. You want to get as much uptime as you possibly can on Mindbender throughout the dungeon. Now, one of the reasons Mindbender is so strong, especially on trash packs, is due to Inescapable Torment here. So Penance, Mind Blast, Shadow Word Death cause your Mindbender or a Shadow Fiend to teleport behind your target, slashing up to 5 nearby enemies for X amount of shadow damage, and it extends its duration by 0.7 seconds. So that big slash is then translated into a bunch of damage and then into a bunch of healing. So I'm just going to kind of go over spells. So if you are a new Disc Priest, you can kind of watch this section, kind of see what spells do what. If you are pretty familiar with Disc Priest, you can kind of skip over this section if you want. Again, just going to go over spells, and then we'll kind of do a rotation review just to see how it all ties in. So the main thing that we need to track on Disc Priest is something called Atonement, and it's a passive here. And basically what this does is it allows us to heal through our damage. So we apply this through something called Powered Radiance, and you get a couple charges of it. And just to show you what that looks like, we got a little cast time here. In the top right, you can see I have Atonement, healed whenever I do damage to an enemy. So if you are playing something like Voidweaver, this is the spell that you're going to have to really time, and it's going to be a little bit difficult to keep full uptime on this. Because when your Atonement isn't up, you're not doing a whole bunch of healing. And don't get me wrong, you still can heal without Atonement, you're just not going to be quite as effective. The spec is made to work with Atonement. And just in case you guys aren't aware of the Discipline Priest buffs, we recently got this spell buffed by 30%. So healing is increased by 100% when not in a raid. Prior, this was 70%. So we got a 30% buff on this spell. So Disc Priest is feeling a little bit better right now. So when you know group damage is coming, we are pressing Powered Radiance and we're getting Atonement up onto the entire group. You can apply Atonement through other spells, such as your Power Word Shield. You can also apply this with other spells like Flash Heal and Renew. So just kind of keep that in your back pocket. Through some of your other spells, you can spread Atonement if your Powered Radiance is off cooldown. It's just a little tedious to do. Up next, we have our Void Wraith, which is our Mindbender that we kind of talked about earlier. And this is your pet that you're sending out, and you want to keep this off cooldown as much as you possibly can. You have a whole bunch of healing that is generated through your Void Wraith, and we can also reduce the cooldown on your Void Wraith through Void Summoner. So we've already covered that a couple times. Let's go into Mind Blast now. So if you are playing Voidweaver, Mind Blast is going to be what is sending out your Entropic Rift. So we will Mind Blast. You can see this rift kind of comes out, and it's going to be one of your core damage spells. And this is such a strong spell due to Inescapable Torment. This is going to make our Penance and Mind Blast kind of cleave through our pet and does a whole bunch of damage and does a whole bunch of healing. That kind of brings me into Penance. Here is on a 9-second cooldown, very similar to Mind Blast. We're going to be following up our Mind Blast with Penance typically, and it does a whole bunch of healing. It does a whole bunch of damage, and just to kind of show you guys what that looks like, it just kind of radiates these beams out. You can target an ally with this, but typically we're using Penance for damage. And then we also have Purge the Wicked here, and there's some synergy between Penance and Purge the Wicked. Purge the Wicked is just like a damage over time effect that you send out. It will do damage. It will also heal through Atonement, and you want to be spreading this out among your targets. And one thing that's very nice about this spell is we can pair this with something like our Penance, and it will actually spread to other targets. So just show you guys what that looks like. We can put a Purge the Wicked on this target, and then we can Penance, and you can see my Purge the Wicked has spread to these other targets over here. So you, for the most part, want to be purging the Wicked before you Penance. So I personally always throw out a Purge the Wicked before I Penance. Now, Penance does extend the duration of Purge the Wicked, so on like a boss fight, you don't have to be spamming Purge the Wicked over and over. You'll be wasting globals like that. And then just a couple other spells I want to talk about, and then we kind of see how it all ties together. We also have our Smite. So Smite's going to be one of those spells that will reduce the cooldown on our Void Wraith. So we're going to be using this kind of as a filler. It will also heal through Atonement. So it is a very strong spell for Disc Priest, so do not overlook it. And then we also have our Power Word Shield. So our Power Word Shield You just press it, it puts a big absorb shield on a target. It's got a 7-second cooldown, but you can actually reduce the cooldown on it through flash heals. So this is going to be through Train of Thought. So flash heal and renew cast reduce the cooldown power word shield by 1 second. Smite reduces the cooldown of penance by ½ second. So what I like to do is I always put my power word shield in a macro, and I always have it followed up by 2 flash heals. So I can power word shield myself into 2 flash heals, and then that CDR from the flash heals now make my power word shield off cooldown basically. So this is kind of like my spot heal single target button. You don't have to use this. This is just something that I personally use. You can have these as different buttons, but I will put this in the description of the video. We'll kind of go over this more in the macro section as well. So let's kind of talk about the rotation and how everything sort of ties in together. So let's just say, for example, we're going into a big trash pack. What you're going to do is power word radiance. You're going to want to get your Void Wraith out into a Mindbender, into a Purge the Wicked, into your Penance, into a Shadow Word Death, into Void Blast or Smite spams. And that's kind of your general rotation. You can see Powered Radiance is almost back off cooldown again. So I'm going to cast it again. We can go into another Penance, into a Shadow Word Death. And basically, you're just trying to keep these buttons on cooldown here. Then we go into some Smite since everything's on cooldown. Oh, look, our Penance is ready again. Our Mind Blast is ready again. And we're just kind of rotating through these 4 or 5 spells. So you probably noticed on my 3 key that I am rotating through some spells all within one button. The way this works is it is a Mind Blast into a Purge the Wicked. And then remember, we always want to follow up our Purge the Wicked with a Penance. And that's just an easy way for me to be able to get the rotation down in my head and then kind of reduce some button bloat all into one button. The problem with this macro is on single target bosses, you're kind of casting Purge the Wicked over and over and you're kind of wasting globals. So on single target scenarios, you might have a second macro where you're not having to cast Purge the Wicked so much. You just want to throw it out once and not have to cast it for the rest of the fight. So something to think about there. But for now, we'll talk about that more in the macro section. What I really want you to take away from this section is keeping these spells on cooldown, and then you kind of have this sort of pocket power word shield, flash shield sort of combo that you can do to snipe health bars in single target healing scenarios. So sort of TLDR there. You're keeping your atonement up as much as you can. You're sending your pet, and then you're just going through your damage rotation, right? So nothing super complicated there, but kind of piecing it all together can be a little bit difficult because you kind of want to do things in a very specific order. So hopefully the macros can kind of help with that. Now for the Oracle tree, nothing changes. It's the exact same rotation. You just have another spell here. You have your Premonition, and you want to make sure that you're using your Insight before you use your Powered Radiance to get that CDR. Okay, so hopefully that made sense. Let's go ahead and talk about cooldowns really quick. So one of your main cooldowns is going to be Rapture here, and I also have a macro for this, which is pretty nice. It puts it into one button, and what Rapture does is immediately power word shield your target, and your next 3 power word shields have no cooldown and absorb 80% additional damage. So during like a high damage phase that is coming out, you can be pretty aggressive with your Rapture. It's only on a 1.5 minute cooldown. So this is something that you kind of want to be proactive with a little bit. And if you know the damage is coming, go ahead and put the Raptures out, put the power word shields out, because you don't want to be wasting globals trying to push up health bars while more damage is coming out and health bars are low. So you can really use it to soften a lot of damage. Very strong button. We also have things like Power Word Barrier on a 3-minute cooldown. This is going to get stronger and stronger the higher and higher keys that you get into, because it's a percentage value, so reduces all damage taken by 20%. So this is a big dome that you can put on the ground just to show you guys what it looks like. And basically your allies can walk through it, and anybody standing within the dome, let me see if I can get my keybind right. Anybody standing within the dome will take 20% reduced damage. So a very huge mitigation spell, and one of the main reasons that people bring Disc Priest is due to their mitigation and their percentage scaling on their cooldowns. So we have Power Word Barrier. We also have another similar single target one called Pain Suppression. Reduces all damage taken by a friendly target by 40% for 8 seconds. Again, another spell here that scales with harder and harder content. The harder the mob hits for, the more damage that is reduced. So you probably want to save this for something like a tank, during a tank buster, during a boss fight, something like that. It has a 3-minute recharge. And then you also get 2 charges of it. So outside of that, we also have Halo here. This is on a 1 minute cooldown. Very straightforward. You just press it and a ring goes out and it heals all the allies within the ring. It will also do damage to the enemies that get caught in the ring as well. In terms of cooldowns, that's pretty much it. Kind of want to get into utility a little bit more, things like power infusion. We do also have Shadow Word Death. I think I might have glossed over this in the rotational portion of the video where we're talking about damage rotation. But what this does is if your target is not killed by Shadow Word Death, you take a backlash damage equal to 5% of your maximum health. So basically you press it, it deals damage. If you don't kill the target, then you take damage back. So just to show you guys what this looks like, you press it, it deals damage to the target, it deals damage back to me. So this is going to be one of those spells that are kind of baked into your normal damage rotation. Okay, I think that's it for cooldowns. Let's go ahead and move into sort of utility. There might be a few small cooldowns in this section as well. So first thing I want to talk about is Fade. This is going to be something that's really good to use on pull in Mythic Plus because this is going to reduce all your threat and it's going to remove any current threat that you have as well. So anytime you're pulling a pack, just go ahead and Fade before you pull. That way you're taking reduced threat and you don't accidentally pull a mob with all the damage and healing that you're doing. And then we also have a talent called Improved Fade, and this will reduce the cooldown of Fade by 10 seconds. And then Translucent Image, Fade reduces the damage you take by 10%. So pretty strong ability there. We also have Mind Soothe. If you're not familiar with this will reduce the aggro range on mobs, and you can use this to skip specific packs in a dungeon. We also have a Power Infusion, and this is probably the main reason that people bring a priest into their dungeon is due to PI. So infuse the target with power for 15 seconds, increasing their haste by 20%. So it's basically a mini bloodlust on a target. And of course, if you are taking Twins of the Sun Priestess, Power Infusion also grants you 100% of its effects when used on an ally. So you want to make sure you're always casting this on somebody besides yourself because you also get the effect. And we also have Powered Fortitude here, increases our party's stamina by 5%. And then in terms of our Dispel profile, we have Dispel Magic. So this is very similar like the Shaman Purge where you can remove a magic effect on an enemy. And then we also have Improved Purify. So Purify additionally removes disease effects. So we have a spell called Purify here, just to read it out. Dispels harmful effects on the target, removing all magic and disease effects. So Purify we can use on our allies to dispel effects, and then we can use Dispel Magic offensively to remove effects from our enemies. Then we also have Angelic Feathers that we can place on the ground. And what this does is you run over them and this can increase our movement speed or our allies' movement speed. And if you are running Oracle, we do have Divine Feathers to where if an ally walks on your feather, you also get the effect. Then the final utility spell I'll talk about here is Leap of Faith. So pulls the spirit of a party or raid member, instantly moving them directly in front of you. So basically you can grip an ally out of any sort of ground effect that they might be standing in. Okay, let's talk about some of the macros that we used in the video. So first thing I'm going to talk about is the damage rotation. So this has a cast sequence reset of 30 seconds, which means 30 seconds after not pressing the button, it will go back to Mind Blast, which is the first spell in the sequence. And the way that I set this up is to Mind Blast into a Purge of the Wicked into Penance. And you always want to Purge the Wicked before you Penance at the start of a pull so that you can spread that effect out. And then Mind Blast is going to be very important to put at the start of this, especially if you're running something like the Voidweaver tree, where we're trying to get that Entropic Rift out. And this is also going to make our Mindbender cleave as well. And then typically you can fit in 3 penance before your Mind Blast is ready again. Let's take a look at this one more time. Let's just press 3 only just to see what it looks like. So Mind Blast into Purge the Wicked into a penance. Then we can cast other things. So let's just wait for a second. Okay, our penance is off cooldown now, so we can penance again. And we quickly bring Mind Blast. So you can see Mind Blast still is not off cooldown, so we can get one more penance in. And now Mind Blast is on cooldown, so it resets to Mind Blast. Again, the problem with this macro is you don't want to be purging the Wicked on boss fights. So you might make a second macro for single target damage specifically without Purge the Wicked in there. And you might just have to put Purge the Wicked on like a separate button or something. However you to do it, doesn't matter. You don't have to use this macro at all if you don't want to. Probably not the most optimal way to play it, but it does kind of help me playing Disc Priest. Then we also have our Power Word Shield macro here, which is really nice because this is going to put Power Word Shield on a target, and then it's going to go over to Flash Heal, and then we can use those Flash Heals for CDR on our next Power Word Shield. So you just kind of saw me do it. I'll do it again though, a little bit slower. Power Word Shield into a Flash Heal, into a Flash Heal, and then now Power Word Shield is off cooldown now. And then we also have the Rapture macro as well. I really recommend everybody to get this macro if you're not using one like this, because what this is going to do is it's going to cast your Rapture, and it's just going to put a whole bunch of Power Word Shields behind it, more than you could like ever use. So the idea here is to put it all into one button, all the functionality into one button that you can rely on to quickly put shields up on your group. So it's not two buttons, it's now just one. And the reason I like this is because you can just kind of spam it, right? So just to show you what it looks like, Rapture's off cooldown. So I can just come in here and spam my Shift 3. I can hover over my allies. I'm just still spamming it. I'm still spamming it. Now that I've gone through all the Power Word Shields, it goes on cooldown. And you can kind of see here, it still has the Power Word Shield icon. That's due to the reset of 30 that's in the macro itself. So you can put that to whatever you want. You can put that to something like 10 seconds if you wanted, just to get the icon to reset a little faster. You can see down here, it is now reset. Okay, let's talk about weak auras now. So I only have one weak aura for you guys. So let me know in the comments if there's any good ones that I'm missing. I'll check them out and I can add them into future guides. The one I'm going to talk about in this video is called Dibs on Power Infusion. And the way that this works is I like to just kind of use it as a reminder more than anything, but you want to make sure that you're keeping Power Infusion up on your group. And what this attempts to do is it tries to pair Power Infusion with somebody who is using a major ability or cooldown. So let's say, for example, you have a Frost DK who just popped his Breath of Sindragosa. So he popped a big cooldown, and this add-on is going to pop up with his name, and it's going to say, hey, you should Power Infusion this guy. He just used a big cooldown. Now, that's really nice in a perfect world scenario where all your DPS players are doing very similar DPS. You can kind of rotate it between them. But in most pug groups, typically there's that one guy who's doing just substantially more DPS than the other two players. So most of the time, I'm just keeping PI up on one specific target. I just kind of use this as a reminder to keep casting it. So a decent little weak aura here, so you can kind of use it how you see fit. So yeah, guys, that's going to be pretty much it for this video. It's very nice that Disc Priest did get some buffs, especially to their atonement healing. I have a video on my channel where we kind of go through the blue post. We kind of talk about some of the individual buffs if you want to check those out. Overall, Disc Priest is in a much better spot than it was in the beta, that's for sure. So going to be a very viable healer if this is one that you do want to play going into Season 1. One small thing here that I did forget to cover is Desperate Prayer. It's on a 1.5 minute cooldown, and this is like a built-in health potion. So I keybind it right next to my health potion, and I just treat it as such, just like a beefed up health potion. So yeah, guys, that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. I also have some socials in the description of the video if you guys want to check those out. Thank you guys for supporting the channel, and we will see you on the next one.